Hello, my name is Ian Beabout, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I thought it would be fun to take a look at this new release from David Bowie, Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, presented in Dolby Atmos. This is the fifth David Bowie studio album, and it was the first to introduce him to a wider audience. David showed up and played Starman on, what was that? Top of the Pops. David showed up and played Starman on Top of the Pops, and suddenly everybody was into this record and into David Bowie's career. This album features the classic Spiders from Mars lineup, that being David Bowie, of course, on guitar, sax, and vocals, Mick Ronson on guitar, piano, and vocals, Trevor Bolder on bass, and Mick Woodsmansey on drums. Also, it has some uncredited harpsichord from Rick Wakeman on one song, which I find rather interesting. So this is a concept record. Ziggy Stardust is an alien who comes to a dying Earth 5 years from the brink of apocalypse. And that's a really interesting setting for this recording. And also, it's kind of parallels the character of David Bowie, because see his performance in Nicholas Roeg's Man Who Fell to Earth. The man had an alien, out of this world quality to him, and it really wasn't that difficult to accept that David Bowie may have been an extraterrestrial. He may not have been from planet Earth. I thought I would also clarify that I am using a 7.1 Dolby Atmos system. You can see my system in another video on my channel, which I suppose I will link at the end of the video, so you can click on it and watch. But I have the two rear speakers, the two fronts, and the two heights. So I am hearing this on a true Dolby Atmos system. I will take a moment and talk about the Atmos mix, which I think is phenomenal. Because I'm guessing that if you're clicking on this video, you've already heard and you already love this record, like I do. But I've seen, especially on the Steve Hoffman forums, a lot of back and forth, and it seems like people are hearing, different things. Some people say that it's all fronts and heights, speakers activity, and very little rears. Some people are saying that it's compressed and it doesn't sound right. Here's my perception. Hang on a second. Hi, Servo. No. He just had to say hi. He knew I was doing something and he had to say hi. Now, I've listened to this about 3 or 4 times. And in my opinion, this is one of the best and most immersive Atmos mixes I've heard to date. Now, I've never heard the 2003 surround mix, so I can't really compare it to that. But I have the stereo mix burned to memory from years and years and years of listening to that thing. I do feel like it does take some risks. For instance, particularly the drums. The drums sound really strong to me throughout the entire album. Really punchy and really muscular. And you can hear the toms fully spread around the room, which is nice. The kick feels really solid, and you can hear it throughout the entire album. There's some really, again, muscular moments, like the opening of Moon Age Daydream, which is perhaps my favorite song on the album, where those drums, you can really feel them. Like, you can really feel them in your chest. And I like having that visceral response. A lot of times you have David Bowie's vocals spread, especially from the center, and his backing vocals coming in either through the heights or the surrounds. And I noticed immediately from the first few moments of this album that David sounds like he's sitting in the room with you. His vocal, it sounds so lifelike, and it has a snap to it and a clarity. And I swear I could hear details in his vocal performance that I've never noticed before. And it even makes me wonder if there's some stuff going on here that was deleted from the original album. It was included here. Like the end of 5 years gets quite intense vocally. Also, I think this album has really creative use of panning. First few seconds of the album, I think it's so crucial to demonstrate that this is an Atmos mix and this is what we're capable of. And this album delivers. You hear that famous opening drum part start all the way from the back of the room, and it hits the heights, and then you hear that those piano strings that are being swept. You hear that either in the fronts or the heights, and immediately the piano, the first chord, hits in the back. So it's this feeling immediately of immersion. It really does feel like this record is part of your environment. It feels like you're living in the space of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. And I really dig it. Like, I feel like this is the most three-dimensional translation of any record that perhaps wasn't mixed by Steven Wilson. I'm a big fan of Steven Wilson's work, but that's what this reminds me of. I would particularly point to like his Jethro Tull mixes, something like Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die, where you have the acoustics kind of twinkling in the front, and there's a lot of multi-layer acoustics going on. And then a lot of like the strings and stuff are coming in the back, or just kind of swelling from the back of the room to the front. And I really like feeling like you're in the studio with this band, and it makes them feel so much alive to me. Also, I thought I'd mention, I talked about Bowie's voice. I talked about his acoustic guitar playing. I hadn't really noticed how much of the arrangements and overdubs were actually David Bowie's. For instance, the bridge of Moon Age Daydream, you can hear his penny whistle or whatever it is up front, and his saxes are so clearly, they're so clearly transparent, and you can hear every detail of that middle section. I don't think I ever realized that was all him playing those parts, which I think is a cool thing to hear. If there's one criticism I have of the mix, a lot of Mick Ronson stuff is a little bit lower than I'd like it to be. I like how in the original mix his guitar is really up front and throaty, and it took me a little bit of time getting used to it, especially on the heavier tracks like Suffragette City. I definitely wanted a little bit more power to the guitars, but I don't think that the Atmos mix has any pretensions of replacing the original mix. I always see these not as the new version, but it's more like a second look. It's a refreshing look. It's an alternate version that is for those of us who like to pick things apart. And I'm definitely somebody who likes to pick things apart because I do mixing and mastering for a living. So everything I hear in Atmos informs the way I mix, and I like being able to pick things out and hearing all these little details. Again, there's moments in the backing vocals that I could never really clearly hear before, like the humming. I know I'm talking about Moon Age Daydream a lot. The humming was so clear. But again, like that's another issue I have, again, is in this track, because I definitely wanted more power on Mick Ronson's famous guitar solo. I wanted it seems like it's floating in the room like it should, like it does in the Ziggy Stardust film, which is presented in 5.1. But it doesn't quite have the power that I wanted it to. So that's like my only criticism across the board, is that I wish I could hear a little bit more Mick Ronson. But the trade-off, I think, is worth it, because he's still there. You can pick him out. It's just you can hear everything else around it with more clarity, and you can pick out more detail, and you can really dig into this album and what makes it tick. Now, I will admit, this has never been one of my favorite David Bowie albums. I like the Berlin trilogy. That's more my speed. But this Atmos mix really reveals to me just how complex and detailed and brilliant this album is. And I think I've underestimated it all these years. I think that this may have actually improved my opinion of the record for what it's worth. This Blu-ray contains a couple of mixes of the album. The brand new 2024 Dolby Atmos mix, which is by the original album producer Ken Scott, as well as the 2024 stereo mix, and two different bitrate versions of the original 1972 stereo mix. These are the 2012 remaster. This isn't a flat transfer situation, which is slightly disappointing. I think when it comes to these archival releases, I would prefer in general, if the original mix is included, that it be a flat transfer and it not have any extra sweetening whatsoever, so that we can hear very clearly the difference between the old and the new. Also, I already have the 2012 CD. I feel like it would have been nice to have included the 2003 5.1 mix of the album. I have noticed in reading a lot of the reactions to this Dolby Atmos mix that many people are listening still on 5.1 systems, and they're missing a lot of the information. With that in mind, there's one other really just teeny tiny small criticism, and that's that they did just release that big box set about 2 months ago, which had all those alternate takes, and there may have been some BBC recordings, and I think that the 2003 5.1 mix was included, but not the Atmos mix. And for me, I knew that the Atmos mix was coming out as a standalone, so I just couldn't justify paying $120 for that box set and getting something that is essentially going to be out of date. So continuing with that line of criticism, that line of thought, I rather wish that this had taken advantage of the Blu-ray format and included some extras on it. I would like to have had Velvet Goldmine, which is a track that I'm really only familiar with from streaming. I've only really heard it on music streaming. I've never owned that on any version of this album that I've bought. And again, the version that I'm comparing this to is the 2012 remaster. That was the first version of this album that I ever owned. So I would like to have had some outtakes on it. Alternate versions would have been nice. Take advantage of the space afforded by the Blu-ray disc format and give us a box set on the disc. I think that would be really cool, particularly for people like me who didn't want to pay the hefty price for that 5 or 6 disc box set. I think it would have been nice to include some of that, or even new mixes of some of those outtakes and those alternate tracks. I think it would have been cool to present those in Atmos if the multi-tracks exist. So that coupled with the lack of flat transfer is my main dig against this. But I think for the price point, which is under $20, you really can't go wrong with this, especially if you only want the Atmos mix. If that's the only thing that you're interested in, I think this is a good buy for the price. I'm just not sure I would purchase it if you're only interested in the stereo remix, because I put on the stereo remix and I can tell that they compressed it, which is rather depressing. So if you only have 5.1 or you're only interested in the new stereo mixes, I say give this a miss. But if you have a 7.1 system, or even more than that, if you have even a bigger Atmos system than that, and you love this album, I think it's a must-have. So with that caveat, it's conditionally recommended. Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, David Bowie, the new Atmos mix from original producer Ken Scott. That's all I have to say about this record. Thanks for joining me and checking it out. Don't forget that in my description, I have a Amazon wish list. So should you like to donate to the channel, you may pick a title on there and send it in. Anything you send to me will inform future reviews, or even has the potential of being the subject of a future review. I think I even have the Rock and Roll Star box set on there. That might be a nice thing to have. if nothing else, for the book and some of the outtakes, but it's not something I necessarily foresee me purchasing. There's too much other stuff. For instance, the next thing I will be looking at is likely going to be the Apostrophe box set from Frank Zappa. I'm really excited about that. That's going to include a new Atmos mix as well as some live material. So it's going to be really fun. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. All right, that wraps it up for me for today. Once again, my name's Ian Beabout, and you will hear from me real soon. Bye-bye.